up, everybody? AJ here. PSE XF30. We're going to go over it. I set up over a dozen of these bows so far, so I feel like I have a pretty solid working knowledge of these bows. We'll go cam to cam, talk about the changes for this year, and also the accessories I'm running, and dive into some of the details on those, including the new Tight Spot 2-point quiver system, as well as the dialed Arxos, the latest pre-production model of which I have on the bow right now. But before we do, if you're somebody who has been wanting more content from this channel or more bow knowledge, just gear, tuning, nerdiness, go subscribe to the Bow Nerds podcast on YouTube and Spotify. And I'm saying Bow Nerds as in bow space nerds. Be careful how you type that in your search bar. But that's the new podcast from Braxton of Hacks and Hunt and we are co-hosting that together. It's sponsored by Dialed Archery. Appreciate those guys for helping us get this thing up and running. We started that podcast because videos like this, believe it or not, actually take a significant amount of time to set up, and both him and I just haven't had enough time to consistently pump these out. And there's so much more gear that we want to be able to talk about and cover. And also the nice advantage of having a podcast is we can have actual experts like Kyle from GCA Custom Arrows and Dialed, Bert Soren, Corey Anderson. We've got a whole list of industry experts on to come on and give us insight that you're not going to hear anywhere else into why the ethos and the why and some of the design elements and features and what led them to design the products that we all love and are interested in. If you like nerding out on this sort of stuff, head over there, go subscribe, come back, watch this video later. Let's get into the Evo XF. So we'll go cam to cam on the XF30. Feels like I have everything that I loved about my Expedite, but in a smaller package, which is awesome. And it's quieter and more dead in the hand. Moving to a smaller axle-to-axle bow, it took me a little bit of time to just get the accessories and everything and tune, just reacclimate myself to that in a smaller package. But now that I have, it's freaking awesome. I've got a little longer brace height, and I'm just finding that it's actually more forgiving than my Expedite was, even though it's a shorter axle-to-axle bow. Maybe some of that's the brace height, maybe some of that's the accessories, the way I have it set up. It truly is a new bow. They went with the new cam system for this year, and we'll get into that more in a second. Wider limb pockets, similar to the EVL32 last year and 34. I found in setting up those Nodens bows, these new PSEs, the Levitate, the XFs, you can shoot them without a back bar and have them set up with just your rest, sight, and a single stabilizer, and kind of like a bare bones hunting configuration, and they tune and set up very easily and shoot really well. But anyway, let's start with the heart of any bow, and that's the cams. I am running the E2 cams for this year. While I was at ATA, I tested out both the E2 and the S2 cams. Very similar geometry in those cams. The S2 are going to be your short draw option, so I believe they go up to 28 or max maybe like 29 inches. The E2s, which are on here, go from 27.5 up to your 31.5. I think that's right, 31.5 inches. So what I would say is, having shot both of those, if you don't need the short draw option, I would stick with the E2. For me, I run anywhere from 28 to as much as 29 inch draw length, depending on the bow and how I feel with it and what kind of release and things I'm using. And in those ranges, the E2 cams just felt smoother than the S2s. But if you're a shorter draw guy, of course you're going to need that S2, and it'll be more efficient for you in those draw lengths anyways. I found, and I've messed around with these cams a lot, how you set them up, especially with the let-off, makes more of a difference than you might have felt with the Evolve cam. And in this shorter 30-inch axle-to-axle bow, you definitely notice those things more. So in my Levitate review, I said that these cams, they go from 80, 85, or 90% let-off. At 90% let-off, there's definitely a hump before you drop into that valley, but that valley is then very secure and you're totally locked out there. At 80% let-off, it's super smooth, but it's definitely more aggressive. And on this shorter bow, I would say that 80% let-off almost feels like a speed mod. Like, it definitely wants to take the string away from you a bit more. But 85% let-off is really that sweet spot. It's smooth to come to full draw, smooth to let down, which is super important for hunting situations. If you're like me and you like practice drawing on every squirrel that comes by your tree stand. Now the valley and the draw cycle and everything is a bit more aggressive than years past, but nothing that is going to be annoying or frustrating for you as a shooter. Talking to PSE and Hoyt shooters and shooters coming from very forgiving systems, they definitely notice that it is a bit more aggressive, but not so much that it's a deal breaker. Talking to Matthews fans trying PSEs, they seem to, a lot of the Matthews guys I know seem to really like this year's cam system. So again, play with those let-offs. It definitely makes a drastic difference, especially in the shorter axle-to-axle bows. Moving on from the cams, I mentioned already wider limb pockets. I believe same limbs as the years past. Those wider limb pockets give you just a bit more stability at full draw, and you definitely notice that. This is a very steady bow, even at 30 inches, and even without a back bar. I did choose to run a back bar just because it makes it even more steadier, and I've gotten accustomed to running a back bar. The guys over at Quattro talked me into it a couple of years ago, and I haven't looked back. I swap out my strings on every new bow, and I'll set up my bows either from the factory or my local dealer, break them in with the factory strings, and then swap out those strings and throw the factory strings in my bow case as backups, which has come in handy quite a few times actually on hunts and going to Total Archery Challenge and things like that. PSE's factory strings are pretty solid. They're live wire strings. They'll run you about a year, which is what you can expect from any manufacturer's strings if you're shooting a lot, if they have good bow strings. Worst bow strings, you'll get you're lucky if you get a couple of months out of them. As far as the builder, I'm running unbound bowstrings. A3 is another bloodline builder that I've run in the past. Both have been phenomenal so far. The guys from Unbound are absolutely great. Going back to the bloodline material, I've been working with bloodline for the last couple years. They make the best bowstring material on the market. You won't hear me use superlatives like that a lot, but it's just true. Everything else is just Stone Age compared to their B99 and some of the other materials that they use for their strings. They use a proprietary polymer coating, so what that means is the strings are smoother, cleaner, don't need wax. They don't absorb dust, water, moisture, so they're less they're almost impervious to changing weather conditions. You don't get stretch, peep, twist, shrinkage, any of that stuff. We were shooting in the rain a couple of months ago when I was in Georgia, shooting out to 50 yards, and heavy rain, shake the bow off, come to full draw, no point of impact shift, because the strings aren't soaking up because there's no wax. Speaking to some of the builders, and I am trying to work my way through all of the builders, some of the builders have shooters that have been running the same strings for 30,000 plus shots without swapping them out, no fraying, nothing like that. So at the end of the day, the materials are only as good as the builder, but the builders that I've received strings from so far, A3, Unbound, they've been just super, super solid. Moving on to the riser. Couple changes to the riser this year, but as far as things that they kept consistent, they kept the QD sling mounts. So if you've got a rifle sling, AR sling with those QD buttons, you can clip those in right there. I know my wife loves that for walking around. Rather than carrying your bow around, you can just throw it over your shoulder. So pretty cool. 2 stabilizer positions. I always run my stabilizer in the lower position. They moved it a little bit forward this year, which seems to be the trend in the industry overall. New quiver mounting options, so you can run the tight spot 2-piece quiver, which, by the way, I am enjoying running. Has a lot of versatility, very customizable. The only reason that I'm running mine so far out from the riser is just because my arrows are too long, so I just can't suck the thing in any shorter without running into something. My only gripe is they include these plastic washers, and these things will back out and loosen up over time after a couple dozen shots. And what's frustrating about that is, so like on the PSEs, I can't speak for all the manufacturers, but on the PSEs, there's a sunken hole to accept these screws right here. So if they had a crush washer, they could actually have this thing sitting in tight, and you wouldn't have these ugly, ineffective plastic washers right here. It wouldn't be that expensive to upgrade, and I think it would just be a cleaner, more reliable setup. But that's my only gripe. Talking to a couple of other guys that are running this quiver as well, they've run into the same issues. So, but otherwise, really nice. You can set the thing up and change the angles and all that really easily. It's a little awkward to set up, but once you've got it in, it's pretty nice. I am running a little shorty bar just to give me a little bit more balance on that left side. and just make it a little more anchor steady. 10-inch Vulcan Pro Quattro stabilizers with their new QD systems on there. I'm running 8 inches. I'm running 8 ounces on the front and 4 on the back. Moving along the riser, they also kept the multiple mounting options for the sight, which is nice. The 2 holes for your rest are now standard, and they have an integrate option as well. So the cable guide system, you may remember from years previously, was like a little rotating rod that you can actually move 360 degrees. There's on like a little bit of an off axis. The nice thing about that was that it really allowed you to fine tune some of your left and right tears and really customize the torque, the amount of torque that was going into the riser. The downside of that is that it could move if you dropped the bow or bumped it. Now, I never personally had that problem, but I know that there were people that did. So they went to a more robust bracket system, which has like a dovetail on it. So definitely more stable, definitely stronger than the system that they had before. I found that I didn't have as much tunability with this as I did the old system, but being that they have the PBS system now, you really don't need it. So these bows tuned just fine without it. Rest-wise, I'm running the AAE Pro Drop, solid rest. AAE is a partner of Nodin, so I wanted to support them. Functionality-wise, it takes a little bit more time to set up than some of the other rests on the market, but gives you a little bit more customization, and it's just as rock solid as anything else out there. I think it's a really good rest. Something new for me this year is this grip, which is from Dudley and Ultraview. This was a collaboration that they did together. I'm going to be completely honest. I had zero expectations when I ordered this grip. I've met Dudley in the past. We spent some time together at a couple of events earlier this year, and I ordered this grip really just to support him and try something new, but I had zero expectations. You guys know, if you've seen any of my videos or my PSE reviews in the past, or follow on Knights of the Apex on Instagram, that I've been a fan of the overmolded PSE rubber grip. But I did find moving to this smaller bow, or moving back to a smaller bow, I should say, that I was having a harder time adapting to just the smaller platform, and I definitely had a bit more torque in my front hand. Going to this grip solved that, and I'm kind of ashamed to admit like how much such a simple accessory really made a difference in my shooting. But it helped to just make my grip that much more consistent. The shape and design, you really don't feel that ledge there at all. It sucks your hand up in there, puts your thumb in a more natural, comfortable position than the overmolded rubber grip or the bare riser. And I find just takes a bit of the tension and stress out of both my wrist and my elbows, which has just made it a much more repeatable shot and just a much more consistent shooting bow for me than when I was running either the bare riser or the overmolded grip. So I've been getting a lot of questions about like, is the grip worth it? I would say for me, absolutely, like no brainer. You're looking at a setup that's probably over $2,000 all said and done. If you've already invested that much money in your bow, what's another $50 at that point? So that's always going to be subjective. I hate that is it worth it question, because what might be worth it to somebody may be completely irrelevant to another person. But I can say, having shot PSEs for the last couple years, being a big fan, that little accessory right there definitely made a big difference. So props to Dudley and the team at Ultraview for that. Finally, moving on to the sight. So this is the pre-production Arxos model from Dialed Archery. You guys might have seen my unboxing video on the prototype. This is pretty much what you guys are going to see. There's a couple of small changes and different tweaks that's going to be made to some of the materials, but the Dial team has been hard at work making updates and getting these things ready for shipping, and as of right now, they are on track to start shipping those pre-orders come June, July. So super psyched for that, because this thing as it exists right now, even though it's not full production model, it's freaking awesome. I would have no qualms taking this into the woods with me and going hunting. I've been shooting it out to 100 yards. I'm actually going to head to the range after I finish recording this, and I want to set my last yardage marks, because right now with the Stub XR on there, one of the changes that they made at the request of you guys following along and sending comments and DMs and all of that, what's been really cool to see is that end user feedback and those requests and how the Dial teams responded and really taking those into account. So one of the things you guys asked for was a multi-pin indicator. So the production model, the prototype model that I first had, you guys might remember, didn't have any sort of indicator, and that was something that we were going back and forth about. They were just going to machine a little mark on the top for your yardage mark, even though it's a double pin sight. So what they did was they made an adjustable indicator, so you could actually use, it's going to come with 2 pins, so you could use those 2 pins, or you could use the machined hash mark for your top pin, which I prefer. I just find having that line next to the yardage mark is a little quicker and easier for my eye and my mind to process and pick up than having the 2 pins that float over the yardage. But for that stub XR, for that lower second pin, I have that first pin actually set to that. So right now, with my setup, I'm shooting a 460 grain arrow, 29-inch draw length, and my top pin at 20, my second pin is actually 60 yards, right at 60 yards, which is crazy because that means that I can potentially get out to like 140 yards with that bottom pin before I come anywhere close to contact with my veins. So really freaking cool. Some of the other changes that they made is there was some redesign to the third axis to make it more robust. They also added micro tune to the third axis, which is super sweet. They threaded the housing in here to accept lenses in the future. Some changes to the slider and the way the fiber optics run to make them even brighter. What I found, I typically like 0.019 diameter pins. These are 0.010s. They seem just as bright as everything else on the market. And even though I prefer a bigger pin, these things are still plenty bright. I was shooting it into the later hours of the evening until it started getting dark, and I had no problem picking up my pin on targets that were shadowed out at 90 and 100 yards. The elevation, the windage bar, it has been redesigned as well, as has the way it interfaces with the elevation turret to be more robust, easier to set up, more consistent. When you loosen this thing up and move it over for your macro adjustments, you don't have to worry about this thing turning on you at all because it's got an actual channel in there. Really nice little feature. Just a couple of little things on there, just some other changes. They made some changes to the bar, like the spacing and the width and the diameter of the channels. So when you have it in either your bridge lock system or your traditional mount like this, it's just easier to see, easier to set up. They also made some changes to like the color palette, because you can customize the colors of these sights. So they made some changes to those palettes to better match the color risers that the bow manufacturers were coming out with. So this is actually their sage color, which matches Hoyt's green and Matthew's green very well. I can't keep up with the specific names. For some reason, even though everyone's using the same Cerakote, they have to come up with their own like unique name for their colors. But it matches up with that bow really well. It also matches up with the Kuyu Verde camo pattern really well. So if you're running camo on your bow, this thing looks really good on there as well. I'm sure I'm missing a whole bunch of other updates. I've been talking about this site and been on the phone with the guys from Dialed so much that I'm losing track of what's new and what's already been talked about and covered. But we'll be covering this. Brax is getting his pick rail version of the site for his Hoyt very soon. So me and him are going to be talking about this site probably on next week's episode. Evo XF30. Awesome job, PSE. But yeah, I'm going to shut up now and go shoot this bow some more. So I'll catch you guys next time. Make sure you not only like and subscribe here, but go check out the Bow Nerds podcast on YouTube and Spotify. And we're also on Amazon Music now. And subscribe to there and check out some of the episodes we've had out. Looking forward to seeing you guys next time. Peace.